Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today we are at day 9 of our complete DevOps course. So for somebody who's watching our channel for the very first time, just to let you know, we are doing a complete end-to-end DevOps course. We call it DevOps Zero to Hero, and I have created a playlist on my channel which has all the previous videos. So if you are watching our channel for the very first time, I would highly recommend you to watch all the previous videos so that you just a gist of whatever the topics that we are covering in this entire DevOps course. Okay, now without wasting any time, if I have to quickly start and talk about Git and GitHub, before that, there is a very important concept for everybody to understand that is called as version controlling. Okay, some people also call it as version control system. Now, what is version control system and why has it become very popular, right? Everybody talks about GitHub and all of these things. So the fundamental core concept of Git and GitHub is version control system. So let's try to understand why version control system has become very popular. So the primary concept of version control system is two things. So it addresses two major problems. Problem number one is your sharing of code, and problem number two is versioning. So let's try to understand both of them. What is sharing? So let's say that you are working in an organization, okay, and there are two developers in your organization. Let's say developer one and developer two. So now what happens usually is both of you are working in a same team. Okay, so this is dev 1 and this is dev 2. So both dev 1 and dev 2 are working in the same team and they are working for a same application. Let's call this application as a calculator application for just a simple reference, right? So both of them are trying to build a calculator application. Now what happens is this guy is writing addition functionality and this guy is writing subtraction functionality. So you are happy with dev 1 is happy with the addition code and dev 2 is happy with the subtraction code, but end of the day, to build calculator they have to get both of their code together and then they have to build a common application. Am I right? So the common application will hold the code for both add and dev. So now you have to share your code between each other and you have to build a centralized application or one common application. So you might think this is a very simple problem and you can address this problem using simple things like you can share this code using Gmail or Slack or any medium, right? Why you need a version control system or why is it even a problem? The problem here is I just took a very basic example, but in a real world scenario, like let's say you're working for Amazon or Flipkart or any MNC, you have hundreds of these files, right? In fact, you have hundreds of packages and thousands of files. So it is practically impossible. Let's say dev 1 has changed 25 files and dev 2 has changed 32 files. So how will you just give this 25 files or how will you give 32 files, and then there will be dependency files like jar files or any number of files. So sharing is not that easy. So that is the one major thing that version control system addresses. And then there is problem number two, that is versioning itself. So what is versioning? Let's take the same example and let's say there is dev 1. Okay, and what this dev 1 is doing is he is writing the addition functionality, and when he is writing the addition functionality on day 1, or whenever he started writing, what he did is he scoped it to addition of two numbers, or the manager scoped it to addition of two numbers and he started writing it. Then there was a change in the code and manager or the product owner asked him to implement addition of three numbers. Eventually it became additional of four numbers. Okay, so now it went to the testing team and let's say it went to the customers as well. Okay, and what happened is the customers realized, or the product management, your company management has decided that nobody is using addition of three numbers and addition of four numbers. It's just a overhead and you don't want these things. Okay, so what is the new requirement that you got is go back to addition of two numbers. Okay, so what you need to do, you have to modify this code to the place that you have written some 10 days back or just 5 days back. Okay, so for this you need to have multiple versions of this thing, right? So primarily you might call this as version 1, version 2, and eventually you will land to version 3 that you have developed to the customer. But what if you want to go back to this piece of code, like you want to go back to 10 days, 20 days, or 50 days? So for that you need a very strong versioning in place. So this is the second problem. Now, here again, I took a very simple example. I call it a plus b, addition of two numbers, three numbers, and four numbers. But usually, this is very huge, right? So on day one, you might modify 100 files. On day two, you might modify just 5 files. Okay. And on day three, you might again modify some 50 files. Okay, so how do you again keep track of this is using versioning. So if somebody comes to you and asks, okay, what is the change that you have done 3 days back, 100 files that you have modified, I just need those things, and just scrap your day 2 and day 3 of development work. So that's why you need versioning. So what are the two problems your version control system, any version control system? Okay, till now we did not talk anything about Git. We are only talking about version control system and the advantages of version control system. Now, because we talked about these things, and why is Git very popular? Okay, so I have been saying that the version control system is a main thing. So why is Git very popular? Okay, so if we call this as version controlling system world, okay, so let's call this as, sorry, version control. Okay, so there are many number of tools that are available even before Git. Okay, let's say Git came into existence 5 or 10 years or 15 years back, but before that there were popular version control systems like CVS. Whenever I started working, the version control I started working with was SVN. Okay, and now everybody is working with Git. So what were these version control systems, and why has Git became very popular? Okay, so basically, the major thing is these two version controlling systems were centralized version controlling systems. Okay, what were they? They were centralized. I'll tell you what is the difference, don't worry. And the way Git addressed this problem is Git has built itself as a distributed version control system. Okay, so this is a interview question that many people will ask you. Okay, whenever you are talking about version control systems, the first interview question that comes to you is, what is the difference between centralized versus distributed version control system? Okay, or somebody might also ask you, what is the difference between SVN and Git? But usually SVN is not used these days mostly, so that's why people usually ask, what is the difference between centralized version control system and distributed version control system, and how is Git solving the problem? So basically, to just put this very quickly and very easily, so scenario number one, where people were using SVN. So whenever I started working, we were using SVN in our organization. And what used to happen was, let's say there was Dev 1 and then there was Dev 2. So both Dev 1 and Dev 2 used to communicate each other using a central server, that is SVN. Okay, so what used to happen is, whenever I want to, like if I go back to previous example, let's say I was writing addition functionality, somebody was writing subtraction functionality. So to share the code, like if I have to share this addition functionality to dev2, the only way that I could do is share it to SVN, and then dev2 will pick the same changes from SVN. So that's why it's called a centralized version controlling system. That means everything used to happen from a central place. Okay, so that central place is nothing but your SVN. And now the concept evolved eventually was the distributed version control system. I'll tell you what is distributed version control system. Okay, so same thing. Let's say there is dev 1 and then there is dev 2. So what dev 1 can do is, if he wants to share the code to dev 2, he can either do through this distributed version control system and dev 2 can pick it, or he can create a copy of this distributed version control system and call it distributed system 2, and he can create multiple copies of it. Similarly, dev 2 can also create multiple copies, and you can basically mimic the central distributed system or a distributed system and create multiple copies of it. Whereas in the previous example, what used to happen was, because there was only one central server, so in some cases where the central system is going down for some reason, so the communication between dev 1 and dev 2 is no longer existing. Okay, so because they were only relying on a central system. Whereas in a distributed system, you can create multiple copies. Like let's say there is one distributed place where your whole code is present. Okay, and let's call it as a Git. What dev1 can do is he can create a new copy of this distributed system. Okay, and he can not directly send the changes to central, I mean the distributed system, but he can send the changes to his own copy and ask somebody else to take the changes from this copy. So instead of one common place, you are creating 100 common places, and developers can communicate with each other using their copies here. And in the terminology, what do you call is a fork. So interview question number two. What is interview question here? Usually when you are dealing with Git, people ask you, or when you are dealing with the distributed systems, people usually ask you what is a fork. So fork is nothing but you create an entire copy of your original source. Okay, let's say your organization is example.com. Okay, and entire code of example.com is hosted on a Git repository. Let's call this as a X Git repository. So what you can do is you can create a copy of X and call it, if your name is Abhishek, you can call it as fork Abhishek. Okay, so what happens is not just this copy, all the code is also present with me. So if this is going down, no worries. I still have my own copy which has the entire code. So this way, the code is distributed. It is not in a single place. So that's why Git is a distributed system which is solving this problem. That's why nobody these days are using SVN and CVS, because if there is a single point of failure, if that is offline for some, this used to happen. Trust me. So because we were end of the day system administrators used to manage this SVN or CVS repositories, right? So we used to create this SVN and CVS on a Linux machine, right? And we used to use this SVN and CVS. Sometimes they used to go down because normally their applications and their servers, they can anytime go down. So whenever this thing is going down, then there was no way developer A and developer B used to communicate. Okay, so let's say this is dev A and this is dev B. Because your CVS or SVN was down, there is no way these two people were able to communicate. So this was the problem with centralized version control systems. I hope you understood this problem. Now, okay, so I think we have understood the difference between centralized version control system, distributed version control system, and we also understood the concept of fork. Now, let's see what is okay, don't worry, we are also going to see this practically, how to create a Git repository and all of these things. But before that, let's try to understand what is the difference between Git versus GitHub. Many people have this question. Okay, even this question is asked in interviews. What is the difference between Git and GitHub? Don't worry, I'll explain it very simply. So Git is a distributed version control system, right? So Git is a open source thing. So you have your open source thing called Git. So what any organization can do is they can download Git, okay, and they can implement the Git in their organization. Okay, so you can create like, how do you do it? Let's say you can create a EC2 instance. Okay, in this EC2 instance, you can install Git, and then you can say that every developer has to commit the changes to this Git server. Okay, let's say there is dev1, dev2, dev3. So they usually DevOps engineer has created a EC2 instance, and in the EC2 instance, he has downloaded the open source version of Git, and he has also created the Git. So what individual developers can do is their code changes they can submit to this centralized Git. Okay, but what happens is, you know, this is fine, but there are organizations that has observed the gap, and what they have done is they have built better solutions in terms of usability. Okay, and they have built better solutions in terms of usability, and also in terms of raising issues, uh, commenting, talking to peers, reviewing the code. Okay, and end of the day, now GitHub or these things also supports project management. So you can also do your project tracking and all of these things. So what essentially GitHub has done is they have built a solution on top of your Git. Okay. Now, the same thing applies to other systems like GitLab, or you have other systems like Bitbucket. So what they're doing is fundamentally they were using the same concept of Git, okay, and they were improvising the existing Git, okay. So without even this GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, you can, what you can do is you can build your own open source version, or you can build, you can download a EC2 instance, or you can download any virtual machine or Linux box, and you can install the open source version of Git, which also comes with the UI, and you can start working on it. But what GitHub and the other people have done is they have built a wrapper, or they have built a solution on top of it. This is a difference between Git and GitHub. Now let's practically see how to create a Git repository, and what are the things, or the most important question is what are the Git commands that a developer, DevOps engineer has to learn, or what is a Git lifecycle. Let's see all of these things. Perfect. So let me stop sharing this and start sharing my terminal, right? Stop share, and let me quickly start sharing my terminal here. Perfect. Now I hope you are seeing my terminal. What I'll do is, let's say I'm a developer working for this example.com organization. I'll create a folder here. Let's say example.com, and let's go to this example.com and let's create a file. Okay, Vim addition. Okay, let's call this as calculator.sh. And what I've done is initially I just wrote a code for addition of two numbers. This is a very simple example. Don't think about the syntax and semantics, everything. I'm just writing it for explaining. So x is equals to a plus b. Now, what happens here is this is just a files that I'm writing, and to keep versioning, or to keep the concept of sharing the code, what I'll do is, I'll firstly create a Git repository here. To create a Git repository, what is the command that you need to do is you need to firstly install Git, right? Git is a command line tool that you have to install. So to install the Git command line tool, you can simply go to your browser, okay, whatever the browser that you have, and come to this page called gitsem.com download, or you can simply search git download. That will be the first website that you can look at. Okay, download git sem. And if you come here, you have an option for download git in any operating system. Okay, so here I am on the Linux operating system. So on the downloads page, what I've done is there is Mac OS, there is Windows, and then there is Linux. So I've selected Linux. Okay, in Linux, again, depending upon the distribution, you can choose your options. Perfect. These are the commands that are available. Choose the command and you can directly install Git. Perfect. So once you install Git, okay, you will see this output. Just enter Git and you will see everything that is available here. All the commands that Git supports. So that will clearly mention that your Git installation is successful. Once you have done that, so the very basic command to create a Git repository is git space init. So it will initialize a Git repository. Now, what did it say? Initialize the empty Git repository. Perfect. The three essential commands that every DevOps engineer should learn is basically the life cycle of Git. That is, firstly, let me show you the commands and then I'll explain each and every command. The commands are git add, and then you have to understand git commit and git push. So these are the three basic commands that everybody should know, whether DevOps engineer, developer, or anybody. What is each and every command doing? So let's say what I've done is I've used git init, and using git init, there is a Git repository that is created. How do you know the Git repository is created? Just type ls-la. It will show you a hidden file. So the blue color, the one that you see here, it's a hidden folder, and this folder is .git. So essentially Git tracks everything using this .git. If you delete this folder, that means your entire repository is not being tracked, or Git is not even watching this entire system. or the entire folder. So let's see what is in this .git before I jump and explain you git add, git commit and git push. So if you look at this .git, it has very important things that your Git uses for tracking this entire repository. The first thing is refs and objects. So using these references and objects, it basically, so everything, every file that you create inside Git, let's say you have created calculator.sh and you have created text file. So everything in Git is tracked as objects. Okay, so that is where your Git objects come into place. Then there is a folder called hooks. So basically using hooks, you can, let's say somebody is unintentionally committing some password or somebody unintentionally committing some API tokens. So using these hooks, you can prevent such kind of things. Okay, and then there is a config. Config is basically used to configure your Git credentials, or let's say you're using a secure Git repository which you need, which requires some secrets or which requires some TLS or certificate. So such things can be put in config. And coming to head, I'll explain you. Right now it is not required, but in future I'll definitely talk about the head. Perfect. So the three important commands that I'm going to explain. The first thing is git add. Before that, just type git status and see what is git telling about your current repository status. So using git status, what you will understand is there is one untracked file. That means you have created something called as calculator.sh, but what git is saying is I don't know if I have to keep a track of this file or not. Like I said, git does two important things, right? One is versioning. So to keep track of the versions, Git needs to know which files to keep track and which files to not keep track. So firstly, what Git will ask you is, okay, there is a file that you have created in this folder and you have also initialized this repository called git init. So now, do I need to track this file or did you create this file unintentionally? So for that, what you need to tell Git is, see, Git is also giving you suggestions. Nothing added to commit, but untracked files are present. Use git add to track. That is, Git is telling you that using git add, okay, enter git add followed by the file name and I'll keep a track of this file. So what is it saying? Now, if you type git status, it says that, okay, there are no untracked files. Forget about these comments here. Firstly, let's see about tracking and untracking. Now Git said that, okay, I understood that there is one file in this repository that I have to keep a track of. That means, let's say somebody is coming here, you are coming here, and tomorrow what you have done is you have modified it to addition of three numbers. Okay, and now let's save this file. Now, what Git will tell you is if you type git status, it will clearly tell you that, okay, somebody has made changes to a file. Okay, so this is the file that somebody has made changes to. What is it saying? Modified one file called calculator.sh. Now, using git diff is a command which will tell you what are the exact changes that are made. Okay, so if you see here, it is telling that, okay, I was keeping a track of one file called calculator.sh, and what I have noticed is you made one change to the file, that is a plus b to a plus b plus c. Perfect. So using this git diff command, you can always check the changes that you have modified. But like I told you, to keep track of versioning, you have to basically, like, tell that this is version 1, this is version 2, this is version 3, so on, right? So in Git scenario, these are called commits. Okay. So if I go back to my previous change, calculator.sh, okay, and let me change this to a plus b only. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll use this command called git commit followed by the message that I want to say to Git. This is my first version of addition. Okay. So now if you do git status, okay, Git said you are on branch main. I'll tell what is a branch. Nothing to commit, working tree clean. That is, Git has understood everything about the changes that you have done. Previously, Git said that there was one untracked file. So in such cases, you used something called as git add. And then Git told you that there is one change that you have made, that for that what you have done, you have committed this saying that git commit minus m. This is my first change for the addition functionality. Now, what you have decided is you will change this file. Okay, and you will introduce a new functionality for subtraction. Okay, y is equals to a minus b, just an example. And let's see what happens if I enter git status. So what Git is saying, and how Git is saying all of these things, because it is keeping track of everything in the .git folder, right? Like I mentioned you, there is one folder called .git, which is Git always referring to, and inside .git you have objects, where inside the objects you have a lot of things that Git keeps in a encrypted way, or in a compressed way, and it keeps track of your entire project. It can be 100 files, 1,000 files, million files, and anything. So that's where if you enter git status, it is looking into .git and it is saying, okay, Abhishek has previously added and committed a file, but after that I see that there is one modification that is made, which is neither added nor committed. That means I don't know if this change is valid or not. And he did not commit to it as a second version or a third version. So that's why Git is telling you that, okay, there is one modified change and do I have to keep a track of it. Okay. So to keep a track of it, what you'll do, similarly, you'll do git add, but always as a developer, you use a command called git diff to see what are the changes that are made. So that Git will tell you, okay, previously this was the change, a plus b, and you have added a piece of line called a minus b, which is the new subtraction function. To add this module, let's say you want to add it and test it. So what you do is git add followed by calculator.sh is the file that you have changed. Okay. Now, if you always try for git status, so that Git will tell you what should be your next command. Okay. What is it saying? You know, it has modified a file that you need to be committed, changes to be committed. So what is the command? Git commit minus m. You can call it, this is my second version. Perfect. So now we will see the real perfect benefit of Git, that is the versioning. Just type git space log and you will understand what is your commit number 1 and what is your commit number 2. So this is my commit number 1. Author is Abhishek.Veeramalla. Sorry, this is my commit number 1. Author is Abhishek.Veeramalla, where it says this is my first commit, and second commit is, again author is Abhishek, where it is saying this is my second version. Perfect. So this way Git can keep track of hundreds of commits. And if you want to go back to your commit, let's say if I again show you my calculator functionality, it has two functions, right? So my project manager came to me and said that, or my product owner told me that, okay, I just want you to go back to the previous version of code that we have written, and let's stick to the previous version. So for that, what you can simply do is search for git log. Okay, in git log, Git will tell you that, okay, this is your first commit that you have done, and this was your previous commit. And if you want to go back to the previous commit, you can simply copy this commit ID. Okay, this is called as commit ID. Just copy it, and you can simply do git. There are multiple ways to do it. This is one way to do it. Git reset hyphen hyphen hard, and you can come to this previous version. So now you are currently at this place. Okay, let's verify. Let me do cat followed by calculator.sh and see that it just has a plus b. Even if I do vim calculator.sh, you know, you can see that there is only one line that was changed. That means I came back to the previous version. So this is how you deal with versioning in Git. So you don't have to use git reset hyphen hyphen hard. This is one basic command that I've explained you. But the primary thing that I wanted to show you was, using Git, you can switch to multiple versions. You can go back, you can, go back to any previous day. So that is the concept of versioning. Now, how do you share this code, right? So right now all the things that I talked about is only versioning. So I initially created a Git repository in my local. Okay. After that, I showed you how to add the files, how to track the files, how to commit the files, how to look at the difference, how to look at the logs in Git, and how to switch from one version to another version. But essentially, you should also know how to share the code, right? So to share the code, if we go back, if you by in the starting of the video, I explained you that there is one distributed system. Using that distributed system, you can either keep copies of your system, or you can share code with your different peers in the team or within your organization, right? So you have to create that distributed system. So this is a local copy, right? All the things that you have is only in your personal laptop. But if you want to create a distributed system, that's where your GitHub or your self-hosted Git or your Bitbucket, all of these things comes into picture, right? So where does your GitHub or self-hosted Git repository or your Git bucket come into picture is when you want to actually share your code with your peers, or you want to actually put this code in your open source, or open the code to your organization, right? So this is where your distributed system comes into place. I'm not talking about centralized systems because, like I mentioned you, the centralized systems are no longer used. So let's say your organization is using GitHub. Okay, so what you have to primarily do is you have to create an account with GitHub. Okay, so because I'm owner of this repository, okay, so this is the repository that I am owning. And let's say I just want to share it with my entire organization. So what I have to do is not just have a copy of it in my laptop, I have to put this in my central or distributed systems. So for that, what you need to do is firstly create an account with GitHub, because we are talking about GitHub, but the process is same for GitLab or self-hosted Git repository. So what is self-hosted Git repository is nothing but, in some organizations people have their own hosted Git, but let's not go into the topic, because one is that is very rare, and the second thing is there is a lot of maintenance activity if you're keeping your own Git. So either go for GitLab or GitHub or any open source solutions that are available for storing the code, or enterprise solutions that are available for storing the code. So to create an account with GitHub, it's very simple. If I open an incognito repository and show you, okay, just click on github.com, and there is an option called sign up. Just click on sign up, and you'll simply be asked for a question called create an account. Click on create the account, and it's very simple. Trust me, this interface is also very good. And just enter your email and answer a couple of questions, and finally your account will be created, and you will see such a screen. So right now I have many followers, I have multiple accounts, so that's why I'm seeing my homepage in this way. But if you are new, then you will not see all of these things. So just click on the GitHub icon that I'm seeing here, that I'm showing here. Okay, in your case, you will go to a plain page, and what you can do is here you will have an option called creating a repository. Okay, you see an option here called new. Click on this new, and you can create a repository. And how do you create this repository is basically, like, come here. Either you can go no template or any template that you have. Select the repository name. Let's say calculator, or let's say simple DevOps. Yeah, let me keep it as Abhishek shell example project. Okay, and you can provide some details about it. Okay, keep the repository public or private. If you keep the repository public, that means to say that you can share it with anybody in this world, or if you are working in your organization and if your organization is using enterprise GitHub or enterprise GitLab, then it can be shared with anybody in your organization. Whereas if you keep it private, then only people you give access can see the code. Okay, and then you can initialize this file with a readme file. Readme is nothing but, when somebody looks at to this file, you can provide some metadata information. Okay, so just like to say that, okay, this is my first shell scripting program, or this is calculator program, and this program has 4 functionalities: addition, subtraction, something like that. And finally click on the create repository. That's it, your repository is now created. And what you can do is, either you know you can push your local changes to this Git repository, or you can directly use starting from here. Like, you can create this calculator.sh, whatever the changes that you have for your calculator.sh. Start putting your changes here, and then tell everyone that, okay, this is the system, and you can start using the system, or you can whatever the changes that are available, push to the system, and everybody can share. And if you want to create copies of the system, you are open to create copies, which are nothing but forks. Like, if you see here, there is an option called fork. So you can keep a copy, or you can create a fork, And using this fork also, you can collaborate with your other developers. So this is how GitHub works. So today we just learned about the concept of Git and GitHub. Okay. But tomorrow we will deep dive into GitHub. So GitHub is something that I'm very interested in, because day in, day out, I work on GitHub. So I'll try to explain you GitHub in a very detailed way. Why is GitHub very popular when compared to even the other tools like GitLab and Bitbucket, or the open or the self-hosted Git repositories, where we will deep dive and see what are the different options, how to create users in it, how to manage your organizations, and we will see what are issues, what are pull requests, how to create CI/CD in GitHub. Although we will keep it to the CI/CD topic, but I'll just show you tomorrow class how does your GitHub CI/CD work, how do you can do project management, you can share some files, security features, all the things that GitHub can do. We will talk in tomorrow's class in depth. Okay. So in today's class, if you have any questions, please post the questions in the comment section so that I can take those questions in a in detailed way. And I forgot to mention that we'll also talk about a few more Git commands, essentially, maybe in day after tomorrow's class or sometime, because it is always good to understand what are the Git commands that are very popular, and day in, day out, what are the commands that you can use, and what are the interview questions as well. Okay. So finally, one final request is, if you have somebody who is willing to learn DevOps, and they are not aware of our channel, please share this channel with your friends and colleagues. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.